Welcome to Connect to Develop, where we provide insight from healthcare leaders on the hottest topic and trends. Hello, listeners. Thank you for joining Marney and I for today's topic, which is building teams that win in a remote work environment. I'm your co-host, Erika DeLeon. I'd like to kick us off with you just diving into your background and your environment that you've worked in over the course of your career.
I graduated college and I had this dream of going into advertising. I spent every year from junior year of high school through college getting ready to go into advertising. I had an amazing opportunity to be a media intern at this awesome shop. And I just realized it wasn't for me. The culture was not a fit. We'll just call it that way. And so then I floundered, and I tried temp jobs where I actually, was in departments where I went in and I did that whole, office space type thing where you go in at the certain time of day and then you leave at a certain time of day. And I just felt like such a fish out of water. And I ended up somehow in sales. I did 4 years of business to business sales, just, literally driving my briefcase around every day and trying to sign up clients and sign deals. Then I had a phenomenal recruiter and an absolutely incredible mentor who at the time was hiring for a position where 2 other people in the surgical industry had failed already to get a very challenging territory up and running with a product no one had heard of, a company no one knew about. That man to this day is still a good friend with his wife and kids. And so I've really been remote almost my whole life, minus a very small amount of time at my previous W-2 company where I was still traveling a ton, but I was in the corporate office. On a great month, it was 8 times. On a month where my travel was just insane, I needed that one day home before I turned around for another conference to, knuckle down and, do laundry before I flew out again for another 3 weeks. So I really haven't had a lot of time living in the office environment. And quite frankly, knowing my personality, that's probably a good thing for society. And so I feel like you can build a hybrid team where some people are in the office and some people are remote, but it takes incredible leadership and it takes people who really want the entire team to win and aren't too concerned about what Sally over here in cubicle 9 is doing or what George is doing flying around the country. But Erika, you've had almost the opposite. So what has your experience been like?
Maria, I didn't start working remotely until what felt like the entire nation started working remotely. So I've been working remote for maybe 5 to 7 years. I had started kind of having a hybrid model before working remote. And I remember kind of dealing with the complexities and the frustrations of not having the flexibility of being remote. And I can now, on the other side, think of the advantage of being able to work remote, having a little bit more of autonomy in my schedule and in my workday. I would love to kind of understand since I came in and into with everyone else, Marty. You, on the other hand, had already been working remotely when it was a new concept for the rest of or the majority of the others in industries. Because it was a newer concept for me, there was definitely like this honeymoon phase, right, where you're home, right? That there's the ability to kind of manage your day. But to your point, the whole mental wellness piece that came out of that and my ability to kind of manage was the fact that I was home, yeah, but so was everybody else. Everybody else was home. And so it was this just trying to figure out how to function with everyone else trying to function in the household between kids in middle school and high school and just all of those dynamics and trying to figure out what does work look like? What does homework look like? It was just such a convoluted, and I'm not saying anything that's new. I mean, I think there's been so many discussions on this, but I realized that I started taking more walks with my dogs, and I needed to be much more intentional about stepping away just to get a little bit of clarity. I started leveraging a lot more of the, FaceTiming or just keeping in touch with people any way that I could because it was important. It was just important to have that human connection and interaction at some level. And so kind of coming out of that now, I think there's a couple of lessons learned is there is no perfect setting in an all remote or an all, in the office. There is, of course, this kind of middle ground of what works. And we've seen 3 platforms kind of evolve out of that, right? You've got your all in person type of teams, your portion that is hybrid where you have obviously some home, some at work, and then you have all remote. So I guess Marnie, kind of thinking back through your entire career, the ups and downs, kind of in the midst of all that, what would you choose? What would be your preference?
I think I probably just self-selected because of my personality into a all remote. And I will say this, I loved going into the office. So when I moved to Chicago, because that's where the home office was based out of Deerfield at the time, that's where my boss at the time who hired me for my last company, she was based out of. I loved going into the office because there was a camaraderie there. And I think there's certain roles that need to be predominantly office based. I think you could at least give them one, maybe even 2 days off. There are probably some roles in certain types of teams where you need to bring them in. And I think what the managers need to do is you need to manage by person and not just create an overall strategy. If you've got people who are going to be extremely good and hit their KPIs, hit them early, and be able to have some kind of balance, and therefore you're going to retain them and you're going to help develop them and keep them within your organization, let them do that. I really think for me, I can only do a remote or maybe tiny in the office hybrid, but I just don't do well when I'm, contained between four walls. Erika, you've led teams, you've developed teams. As a leader, hearing this, how do you make that equitable, right? Because what if you've got so and so that needs the structure and they're supposed to come in, but are they going to get upset because, Jones over here gets to fly around and, not come in?
Marnie, and you're actually, it's almost like a case study that you're bringing up, and we could probably talk about this forever. But at a high level, my experience when I transitioned into remote was at the same time that my team. So not only was I trying to figure it out, I was trying to figure out what that looked like for the team and kind of trying to figure out what tools and resources we had, what everybody individually needed, to your point, to be as, as productive, as supported as they needed to feel and be. It's a challenge. You are absolutely right. You can create a framework, but there is no perfect blueprint that fits every single need. And so a lot of that time frame, now that I'm thinking about it, was figuring it out as we went. And it was failing hard, and then getting up and getting up quick, because there was really wasn't any time to waste. So it was a lot of one-on-ones and acknowledging, like, okay, how do they feel about the fact? What were their preferences? Because everyone assumes that everybody wants to be remote. Everyone thinks that everyone's going to be happy in this remote setting, but that's not necessarily true. And you have to get to really understand, how is it that your team members are going to not only be empowered every day to complete their tasks, but be motivated. That's really what it is. People lose motivation. So we had to kind of look at how we communicated globally as well as individually. What did that look like for everyone individually? What systems did we have? I mean, of course, we all went kind of.
Can we unpack that motivation? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
I know we're getting onto some really good stuff, but how are you not motivated simply because you're home on the same exact stuff that you are expected to deliver in the office? I don't understand why someone would be less motivated. In my mind, you're saving at minimum 3 hours. If you think about it, I actually timed this back when I was commuting and going into the office between waking up, getting ready because, we have to shower and do all of that stuff, hopefully, commuting because I moved to West Loop, but the office was out in Deerfield, walking into the office from the train, getting to my desk, settling in. It's Chicago, so plan on 15 minutes to just get all of your gear off because it's snowing outside and you came in looking like Ralphie's little brother in the Christmas story. I wasted at minimum 3 hours of productivity that I could have been doing on things that made me happy and made me productive at home so I could have some kind of life or even just working. And I think the people that dial into the remote work actually work more because that office is just taunting you from down the hallway and you can be on that thing 18 hours a day. So, can you tell me about the motivation? Or do you think that there are people, and this is totally okay, that just need that accountability of other people watching them to be able to get things done?
I think it's both. I honestly, having just again using that example of that time frame, I really believe that it's both. You're going to have people that just need to have that level of accountability, somebody looking over their shoulder. But by no means am I a favor or a fan of micromanaging. but being able to at least have those constant check-ins in person helps people thrive. You, and I agree with you, I'm actually on your court. That is just the fact of being able to convert that 3 hours of commute into actual work produced. It's a discipline that you develop and you maintain and you execute, where there's people who thrive on being able to go into the room next door, Marnie, and knock on, be able to have access right there, right then in the office. They need that. And that is the way that they thrive in their role. And
Hmm.
so, that's a dynamic that is very, very relevant today. And going back to your point, where you have to look at the type of role, right? You have to
Hmm.
profile that role and you have to really assess what is required of that role. And is that role a remote, hybrid, or in the office type of role?
So
And
then what happens though when you're the hiring manager and you don't get as good of candidates maybe because people see that you're hiring for a role where there's a required office and people are very used to and enjoy not doing that, you're going to miss out on some great talent.
There's a shift, right, that takes place in just leadership on that topic. Because, and I could be wrong, but just with my experience and just feedback of my, partners in the field, they've been burned, right? They've been burned. There's been some lessons learned in trust, in accountability, and therefore then they can easily become one-sided on, okay, well, that didn't work, so then this person or this role has to be an in office role. But I really, really want to go back to what you said. It's all about setting the framework of expectation. So KPIs, productivity, what does that look like? How can you map that out on the front end as much as possible so that there is no confusion? You are either meeting performance or not meeting performance, right? You're either a great fit or not a great fit for the role, not necessarily a good fit for being remote, hybrid, or completely in office.
Let's say you've got a team of 5 people, 5 to 10 people. Let's say that you've, done the DISC assessment or the Enneagram or whatever, pick your personality trait. So what do you do if you identify that, 3 of your people just need that accountability, that camaraderie, that structure of going into the office? And yet there's 2 people that say, I want to keep this job. I have opportunities elsewhere. I will stay in this job if you let me go, 2, 3 days remote or whatnot. What do you do? I think that's the biggest challenge out there. And I feel like HR teams are kind of rigid about, nope, we said this.
Yeah, and then that's where the hybrid model is key, kind of defining the hybrid model, Marnie. Like, I think it's tough to make those changes when someone's already used to the setup of a team being a certain way. You have 5 roles, all of those roles are either remote, hybrid, or at home. But to your point, if you've got 2 people that actually they produce more when they're home, you kind of have to look at those roles and kind of look at that individually. It might be an opportunity to kind of restructure the setup of how that team is organizationally set up, right? And it's a lot of work.
Mhm.
Sometimes you do have to go back to the drawing board and rewrite the descriptions, be clear, bring your team in, what are those KPIs? There has to be a lot of justification for we're moving in this direction and here is why. But, every team has to have that assessment within their organization and present that feedback back to their, tier up leadership as to, here's what works, here's how we're going to optimize our team members as much as possible.
I think that makes sense. Well, this is a great debate. I actually think for on the next one that we do on this topic, let's bring some people in that run massive teams and let's host it. Maybe we get HR to sign off on whatever they say can and will not be held against them. I don't know.
No, that would be great. I mean, there's no one side on this. I think you hit it on the nail when we started. It's what's the industry, what's the role, and what's the best framework to set up that particular role for success. There's when you're sitting there doing a budget and you're looking at capital and you're staffing your team, it's because there's a function they're going to fulfill. And sometimes that's remote, sometimes that's hybrid, and sometimes that's in the office. And there's a lot of work to do on the leadership side. So I love that idea. I would love to have people come in and expand on this topic.
You can find more interviews on our YouTube channel at Marney Reid Presents.